Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ontario Cryptids. I hope everyone had a great week, and happy belated Valentine's Day to everyone. I hope you had a special day with your significant other. I know I'm late. I forgot to post on my social media account due to how busy I was at work last week. Okay, why don't we get started? Today I have 3 encounters to share. We will be heading to Ontario, Florida, and West Virginia. If you have an encounter that you would like to share, I know of a great place to share your story with like-minded people. You can forward your encounter stories to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. All right, here we go. Grab yourself a beverage and get cozy in your favorite spot and sit back and relax. This first encounter takes place on September 28th and 29th of 2007. This is a fishing trip that occurred somewhere between Perth and Westport. There are many, many lakes, so I just chose Westport as my destination. Our sighting occurred over a 34-hour span on September the 28th and 29th in 2007. A group of us take an annual fishing trip to a lake that is about halfway between Perth and Westport in Ontario, Canada. One of the guys, let's call him Harry, on the trip, had a quadruple bypass surgery a few years earlier and gets up to walk 8 to 10 miles each morning around 5:30 a.m. On Friday morning, he got up for his normal walk, and while turning the corner towards the owner's house, he saw something in the darkness next to the owner's deck. He had an LED flashlight and shined it on the deck, 40 to 50 yards max. The thing was reaching over the deck railing, and upon having the light shined on him, he turned away and slowly walked away from the deck towards an open field and east towards the forest, turning away from him. Harry continued on his walk. On the way back, he stopped at the deck, still very early but now daybreak, and measured the height. Where the creature's upper thigh came to on the deck was the same as his mid-chest. At this point, Harry said nothing to anyone about it. The following day, Saturday, we had our annual fishing derby, which isn't very serious, which runs from 9 a.m. to noon. After deciding the winners, which gets their names engraved on the trophy, everyone either hangs at the cottage, goes to town, or goes back out fishing. 2 of our more dedicated guys decided to go back out after lunch. The lake has a river on the opposite end from where we stay that flows in from the southwest end and exits the northeast end. The guys, and we'll call them Matt and Tom, went to the inlet at the end of the lake and went as far up the river as they could, probably a mile or so. They then drifted down the river fishing for bass. As they approached the mouth of the river, they were on the north side of the river. There was a canoe with 2 people paddling upriver and talking, closer to the south shore of the river. As they looked at the folks in the canoe, they both saw an animal on the shore behind the canoe observing the people in the canoe. Tom said to Matt, "Hey Matt, check that out." And they both watched the animal walk along the bog and step up and over the bank to the marsh into the brush to disappear. I have since been to the other side of that marshy bog location, and there is no way a human can or would get there, let alone move easily. That evening, we were all sitting in the living room as usual, reflecting on the day after a few beers. I will never forget Tom saying something like, "All right, I gotta say something. I don't know what I saw, but it got up on 2 feet, walked along the shore, and went where nobody could go." As he was speaking, Harry was just about to take a sip and stopped dead cold and said, "Oh, F. I just convinced myself I didn't see what I did." Harry then told what he had seen the morning before while on his walk. We were leaving the next day and nobody bothered to check for footprints or anything. If you've been conditioned to think something doesn't exist, you don't react the way people may think. If you had the chance to go back to that day, I would have been in the woods at both ends of the lake looking for signs or footprints. It wasn't until the ride home that I really started to think about what happened. During the following week, we slowly started Googling for websites. We found the BFRO, which had an encounter reported from the scout camp on the same lake in the 90s. Since then, there has been a report from a cabin outside of Westport about 10 months after our encounter. I have since placed game cameras, started with 2 and ended up with 6 in the area from August to January annually. Great photos of deer, raccoon, porcupine, and fishers, but no squatch. Matt and Tom are avid hunters who spend many hours in the woods each year. Harry is a self-employed businessman who doesn't hunt anymore, but knows what he saw. My job has been to document the detail of the trip. Okay, this second encounter takes place on January 4th of 2012. This one takes place in Polk County, Florida, and the nearest town is Groveland. This encounter takes place in Green Swamp Wildlife Management Area. I've been hunting Green Swamp since the late 70s. Though I tend to hunt more than one wildlife management area each year, the Green Swamp WMA is the go-to area for me. I have spent possibly 1,000 days in Green Swamp over the last 35 years. I am very familiar with the terrain and all the plants, insects, and wildlife in the area. I have a demanding job that makes it difficult to coordinate a hunt with friends, so for the last 30 or so years, I have hunted alone. I have walked in and out of different hunt locations in the dark hundreds of times and have never seen or heard anything that has alarmed me. Around 2010, a new tract of land was added and opened to hunters in Green Swamp. The tract is about 1,000 acres of planted pine that are about 15 years old, trunks about 10 inches in diameter and clear of branches up to about 7 feet. The planted pines are about 15 feet apart and are planted in rows. Each row is about 15 feet apart. There is a heavy layer of pine straw, so very light, low vegetation is present. It is possible to see for hundreds of yards down each row, but visibility to each side across the rows is limited to about 50 yards. The pines are planted between natural cypress swamps and a few small ponds. Access is limited to foot traffic only, and there is only one way in and one way out. Hunting this area requires a lot of walking. I will often take a vacation in January and hunt for the better part of the week in the green swamps before the season closes. After the Christmas holiday, the woods are quiet with few, if any, hunters. During the week, it is not uncommon for there to be fewer than 10 hunters in the entire 55,000-acre WMA. In mid-January of 2012, I had taken a vacation to hunt this area. This was my second year hunting the new area. It was midweek. There were no other vehicles parked at the entrance to this area. The weather was cool and clear. I was using a large garden cart of the type sold at Tractor Supply to haul in a heavy climbing tree stand that would also be used to haul out a deer or hog if required. I had hunted the edge of the swamp that morning, and at midday, I decided to take down my stand and move it to another location. I loaded up my cart and was pulling it along, rifle in hand, down one of the long rows of pines. I got to a location that the visibility down the row, looking due west, was exceptional, so I took a break, but was still actively hunting game that might cross this row. I set my backpack as a rifle rest and lay prone. My line of fire was west down the row. I am in full camo, but no face covering. My garden cart is an unnaturally bright green with silver painted wheels with tree stand on top, probably about 40 inches in height overall. It was between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m., bright but indirect sunlight through the young pines. I had been there for a few minutes and had been checking for work emails on my phone when I caught a motion to my left. I looked up and there were 3 big dudes in black ghillie suits no more than 10 yards away from me, walking in a single file, quartering away, crossing my line of fire. I laid there surprised but motionless and let them pass. They walked in a north-northwest direction for about 50 or 60 yards into the cypress swamp before I lost sight of them. Shortly after they walked out of sight, they started banging around in the swamps loudly. The banging sounded almost metallic, a dull dunk like hollow aluminum against a tree. I thought these guys were very, very loud and curiously taken their tree stand down. There were possibly 20 bangs. I got frustrated that these guys had ruined my hunt and stood up, got situated and began to head west with my cart once more. As I crossed their path, I noticed a distinct game trail that they had used. I continued on and hunted that evening and the rest of the week in the area. I had my phone camera in my hand while I was watching them walk closely by. I had no fear or reason to take a picture or video because it never crossed my mind that I was seeing anything but foolish hunters. They were walking rapidly but quietly. They walked fully upright with human posture, normal arm swing. Narrow at the waist and broad across the back. They appeared to be 3 physically fit, tall, young hunters in unusual black ghillie suits. They were big, but not alarmingly big. All 3 were identical size and shape, maybe 6'4" to 6'6", and approximately 250 pounds. I did not notice an odor. Because they were quartering away, I did not see, or for that matter even look for any facial features. 3 big dudes in black ghillie suits with no hunting orange, no rifles, no gear, walking directly in front of my loaded rifle, and me with my big ugly wagon are close, in the open, and in plain sight. I told my buddies at work about it. They suggested that it might have been a Fish and Game Commission's trying to catch poachers. For 2 years, something just didn't seem right about the whole incident. The more I thought about it, the more unanswered questions I had. Unanswered questions. They walked about 10 yards from me in very good light. Me and my wagon were very conspicuous. I was motionless, but how would a person, much less 3 people, not see me out in this open terrain? They walked in front of another hunter with a loaded rifle. No hunter would do that. They had no gear, no vests, no hunting weapons. They were carrying nothing. If they were not hunting, were they hunters? Black ghillie suits. I have a green one and a tan one. Have never worn either while hunting because they snag on everything. Why would someone wear a black ghillie suit in a green environment? If 3 hunters decided to hunt in ghillie suits, they would probably be green and would likely be different from one another. These were all exactly the same. The ghillie suits are actually, and on purpose, very symmetrical, often baggy and droopy with rows of materials sewn on. These were form-fitting and ununiformly 3 or 4 inches in length. I would describe as long like wet hair. The banging noise. About a year ago on a Saturday, I was watching River Monsters, Swamp People, and one of the Bigfoot shows. it dawned on me that the banging around might have been a tree knock. Until watching that show 2 years after the incident, I had never heard about tree knocks, so I had not previously made the connection. And that is when I began to wonder whether I had actually seen something other than hunters that day. All right, here's the last encounter of the day. This one takes place on January 9th or 10th of 2007. It takes place in Randolph County, West Virginia, and the nearest town is Elkins. We were backpacking in the Otter Creek Wilderness near Elkins, West Virginia. It was the first week of January 2007. It was unseasonably warm. We were out for about 4 days and 3 nights. The third night, we were camping by Yellow Creek. It was Saturday night at about 4:30 p.m. It was starting to get dark and we were working diligently to start a fire. It had rained on and off the entire time we were there, so everything was wet. As I used a small log to hammer my hatchet through another log, splitting kindling, I heard something howling way up the hollow. It was pretty far off by my estimation, and at first I mistook it for coyotes. I kept hammering away as my buddy, who was working for ODNR Division of Wildlife, was talking. He hadn't heard it. I then heard it again, the same call. This time something struck me as strange. It wasn't a coyote. There are several reasons I quickly came to this conclusion. The call was long and drawn out without the typical undulations and yipping associated with a coyote. It was also very far off. If it had been a coyote, it would have been at least 300 or 400 pounds to produce that kind of volume. I stopped hammering. My friend looked at me and immediately asked what I was listening for. Then we heard it a third time. It resembled the scream of a woman, for lack of better comparison. It was quite long, perhaps 5 to 6 seconds start to stop. It definitely resembled a primate call of sorts. Coyotes had never made the hair stand up on my neck before, and I can identify about every call in the woods in this part of the country. I looked at him and asked if he could tell me what he had just heard. He said that he could not, and we both agreed neither of us had ever heard anything like that. I have heard similar recordings on websites devoted to the North American great ape theory, aka Bigfoot. My buddy and his fiancée had also brought their dogs. She hadn't heard it, but the dogs had been acting strange since we arrived at the campsite several hours earlier. At one point, they were barking at what seemed to be nothing. One of the dog's hairs was standing on end from the base of his tail to the back of his neck as he sniffed the wind and repeatedly barked in the upwind direction. This was about an hour before we heard the call. It was still daylight and we saw and heard nothing. It was obvious to me that whatever he was smelling was scaring him. After going to our tents for the night and the fire had burned down, I heard more noises closer to the camp. It sounded as if someone was stomping around in the rhododendron and was not trying to be quiet at all. I also heard branches snapping and they sounded pretty large. This was in the direction of Yellow Creek, perhaps on the other side of the creek. My friend did not hear this. They somehow had gotten to sleep. This only lasted for a few minutes and then ceased altogether. There you have it, guys. 3 fantastic stories again. The first story, I don't know how somebody can see something odd and just continue on in their walk like they had seen absolutely nothing. I know if I had seen an unusual large figure getting up from the deck and then walking into the bushes or the forest, I would definitely not be continuing my walk. I would be just turning around and heading back to the cottage or going onto a roadway to walk, but I would not be heading anywhere in the direction that I saw this thing. I don't know about you guys. Weigh in on that and let me know what you would have done. Now, the second story, the hunter, I definitely do not think that were 3 hunters walking in a black ghillie suit. That was definitely 3 big fellas walking around in the bush. By fellas, I mean like the wild man or the Sasquatches that live out there. Now, the strange thing about that story is I thought it was unusual that they did not spot him lying on the ground, or if not spot him, at least spot his cart. In any case, interesting story. I definitely think that he witnessed 3 big guys walking in the woods, probably going on a hunt. Who knows? Now, this last one was interesting. It wasn't a full visual. However, just hearing somebody howling and then it turning into a scream would just, set me off for the entire weekend. But hopefully for these guys, it turned out it was only on the last night. Anyways, tell me what you think of these 3 stories. Tell me what you think they have encountered. If these stories reminded you of an encounter that you may have had and would like to share, then please forward your stories to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. I would be honored to share your story on this channel. Thank you guys for listening until the end. I truly appreciate it. Please hit that like button if you're on your way out and smash that subscribe button if you're new to my channel. Many people have commented as to how surprised they are that the channel isn't as big as they thought it would be. And the reason for that is YouTube will promote a channel by the number of likes and comments that it receives. So if you'd like to see this channel grow, then please hit that like button, like I stated previously, and feel free to comment. I love answering your comments or just reading your comments. So guys, thanks again. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I hope to see you all next week right here on Ontario Cryptids.